Audio.
Already tested the audio.
Of course you should. Thanks, Don. All right, we'll call this meeting to order. So thank you all for being here. We'll start with roll call. And we do have some people that I don't think come at least every time. So if we could just maybe say your role then on CSAC, that would be great. And so I'm Molly Bruner. I am a co-chair of CSAC. John Shiro, who is our other co-facilitator, he is co-chair on vacation, and Kelly Mitchell should be here soon. She was in transit. So that, and I also am the director of community corrections here for Scott County and the current president of MACAC.
Hi, I'm Matt with MACAC. Most of y'all know me.
Good morning, Kurt Mortensen, Otter Hill County Commissioner, here on behalf of AMC.
Good morning, Barb Weckman-Brecky, Scott County Commissioner, here on behalf of AMC, and welcome to Scott County again.
Hi, I'm Don Click. I am administrative support.
Erin Thurgleton, project manager with the CSG Justice Center.
Sephra Reynolds Tanner, policy analyst for Council State Government Justice Center.
Becca Muscat, Minnesota Alliance on Crime, representing victim interest.
I am Kim Britt, and I'm here representing the Livid Experience.
Will Cooley, Policy Director, Minnesota Justice Research Center.
Amber Brown, a person with lived experience. Welcome. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, and I can just call out people's names. So, Jake.
Good morning, Jake McClellan, representative for the Department of Corrections. I serve as a regional manager for DOC and member of CSAC.
John Priam.
Good morning, John Priam, Prairie Island Tribal Police, and I represent MIAC.
Julia Tella.
Good morning, my name is Julie Atella. I work at Wilder Research as a research manager, and I am representing community evaluation.
Kevin Glass.
Good morning. Kevin Glass here representing the Evidence-Based Practices Statewide Advisory Committee. I'm the chair. I'm also the probation director for Itasca County Probation, and I am the current president of the Minnesota Association of County Probation Officers.
Ron Anthony.
Ron Anthony, Yellow Medicine County, representing CCA counties appointed through AMC.
And Scott Halverson.
Good morning, I'm Scott Halverson. I represent the Department of Human Services, and I'm currently the Reintegration Director for the Minnesota Sex Offender Program.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. So we will move on to the second point of the agenda, which is, to approve the agenda and the draft meeting minutes, which was attached to this invite. And for those in the room, we do have copies behind us. So I would look for a motion to approve those two.
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second?
Second.
You can, but yes, either way.
Oh.
Second from Commissioner, but yes, you can. Any discussion or addition? Okay, so then we'll do roll call.
Okay. Ron Anthony.
Aye.
Julia Tella.
Aye.
Kim Britt.
Aye.
Amber Brown. Molly Bruner.
Aye.
Kevin Glass.
Aye.
Tracy Green. Oops. Scott Halverson.
Aye.
Nick Henderson. Nicholas Henderson. Jake McClellan.
Aye.
Kurt Mortensen.
Aye.
Rebecca Muscat.
Aye.
John Priam.
Aye.
And Barb Weckman-Brecky.
Aye.
All right. All right, so then we will move on to agenda item number 3, which is the ISR transformation policy feedback, and that would be you, Jake.
Hey, all right. I will pull my policy up on the screen and share for everyone. Is everybody seeing the policy in front of them?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me blow it up just a little bit more. Well, first and foremost, thank you to those that provided feedback. Very helpful. Myself, Becky Bales-Cramlett, and Nikki Niles serve as essentially the chairs, and I would probably just say, lightly the policy chairs at this point regarding the ISR implementation policy in relation to the supervision standards. So I do have a couple of notes here. The version that was sent out by Don, I did have to make a couple changes. I have those highlighted in red, but as I present this, I have the highlights on this policy draft to show you exactly the changes that were made. I'll just, if some of you have worked with policies and track changes, it gets really ugly and messy. It's hard to follow. So I've just used a highlighting option to focus on those changes specifically. I'll talk about the changes and maybe some of the suggested changes, maybe why we didn't make some changes or maybe went a different direction. So I'll, if any questions, please holler them out at any time. Starting off within the definitions, we made an adjustment to intensive supervised release. Well, just further defined it a little bit more, level of supervision of clients for 1 year or until expiration of sentence. I think we missed that through this policy, that supervision of ISR lasts for 1 year, or if those individuals don't have a year, it lasts through until the expiration of their sentence. So level of supervision of clients for 1 year until expiration of sentence, whichever is less, of a client released from a correctional facility who scores very high on the MnSTAR 3.0 is designated as a level 3 registrant by the end of confinement review committee, or they are a supervised release board releasee. So that language will also mirror within the release planning policy. I believe Carter Deers, our director, is close to, or that draft has been out, kind of going through its vetting process right now. A change in the previous versions, we had case plan and we had case planning. Redundant. So again, we're trying to match the same language that we're going to be seeing with MRRA, Minnesota Rehabilitation Reinvestment Act language. So the case plan language will be consistent as it's stated here. Case plan guides the corrections practitioner and client towards the accomplishment of specific requirements and goals. The plan targets criminogenic needs and should be written, time and goal driven, and dynamic in nature. Case planning is different than monitoring the client's condition. The purpose of case planning is to reduce a client's risk of reoffense by building skills using cognitive behavioral interventions targeting clients' criminogenic needs. If a client has more than one criminogenic need, the initial case planning process will help align with an initial area of focus. Another, I would say, significant change, if you will. I had the language discretionary release planning, and that is, it's a process, but it's not necessarily a defined thing that's really universally known by all. But what that really means is a discretionary release planning process, which will be outlined in the release planning procedure here. It uses a multidisciplinary team: the case manager, the agent, the release planner, individuals in the community that may be supporting an individual's release. So it's developing a meeting between the incarcerated person, multiple DOC staff, and community supervision staff, including the caseworker, in which the results from the assessment summary report are reviewed and the individualized release plan is developed or updated. So at this point, it's like we are using this multidisciplinary team to help structure those that are release violators. With ISR is unique because if you're an intensive supervised release violator, your subsequent release is not mandatory like it is for all supervised releasees and initial ISR clients. So we've had a lot of legal challenges historically with this. Changes were made in the past where supervised releasees that did not have release plan could be held past their subsequent release if they're a release violator. So we've proactively put measures in place to expedite and mitigate any client that's held beyond their release, beyond their subsequent release date as a release violator. The cases we see in these particular instances are your level 3 registrants. Those are the cases with significant mental health, a lot of burned bridges, if you will, where we work very closely with the case manager, the agent, even the agent supervisor participates on this team. So we've seen a lot of success with this. And what this really is just memorializing this in a policy. So the process, as we call DRP, discretionary release planning, it's a multidisciplinary team approach. It's a proactive measure that we've implemented over the last 4 or 5 years, I believe. But we're just memorializing this process within the policy. Moving into procedure A on release planning, a change we made is we were back and forth. Who's responsible to schedule that virtual meeting 60 days prior to release? So we said the agent and case manager are responsible. So we put it both on the agent and case manager's responsibility to make sure that virtual meeting happens 60 days prior to release. One of the feedbacks is reunification principles. So I added that as an attachment, as attachment A to this document, to this policy. Adding in, agents will establish contact with victims where and when appropriate. So some of the feedback is, where are we engaging with the victims? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in relation to Haven and kind of that notification processes within Haven. But adding a little bit more structure about bringing that to the forefront about making contact with victims where and when appropriate, and those that are interested and willing to have contact with agents. In procedure A-C, regarding identifying community supports, programs, other agencies, that language is consistent. However, agents are encouraged to include these individuals in the virtual meeting when appropriate. So if you have some community support people to help welcome people back in the community, or an example I've used consistently is like Northwest Indian Community Development Center. They have a lot of release planning supports. We may bring an individual from them into the meeting to kind of say, hey, here's how we can help you transition upon release, or we have a placement for you here. This is how it's going to look. So kind of bringing in a little bit more from those community supports that can help kind of ease the pain of transition, the worry, the concern that we've heard from individuals releasing, to bring them into the meeting as well, which kind of helps mitigate that anxiety for individuals releasing. At the end, adding in, if the individual, letting the individual know if they're eligible to earn compliance credits. At that point, review the individualized rehabilitation plan and establish initial goals for the client upon release. So that is the changes for our release planning section of the policy. Moving into electronic monitoring, we had some feedback related to kind of a process in place, kind of a quality assurance process in place for individuals that are placed on electronic home monitoring. That includes GPS. So we tweaked the language a little bit. If the agent believes the client should remain on monitoring 90 days or more, agents will review monitoring needs after 90 days of designation and provide an agent, and I may have to tweak that a little bit, documented reason to the supervisor for continued monitoring. So I apologize, you stare at these policies long enough, you don't even see through some of your own language snafus there, so my apologies. But this is just more or less quality assurance. So, you know, is there even a designated reason to keep them on for 90 days? Is the individual compliant? So we don't want to drag on monitoring, you know, so like the what-if-itis, I use that term a lot. We just want to keep it on just in case. Well, there should be some documented compliance going on, and that agent should document that. If there's a reason not to keep them on beyond 90 days, or the supervisor should possibly intervene at that point, saying, I think they're showing compliance, we can remove monitoring. At the end of the day, monitoring is still a supervision tool that we can use throughout supervision. We just want to set up some parameters around quality assurance and how long we're keeping an individual on monitoring, and not you know, having individuals on the entire term or 6 months of supervision, all the while if they are compliant with their accountability. Moving into supervision standards. supervision agents providing high quality services. That's kind of what it boils down to. Made a tweak at the end of this sentence here. Those include, but not limited to. So what this is saying is like, we want to include these things, but agencies may have additional tools, may have additional interventions, et cetera, that may include. So we essentially are saying we're not boxing this in, saying this is the only thing you can use. So I think it opens the door more broadly for other intervention opportunities. Case planning, we made a tweak within the case planning. I think we recognize and identified a 4-step process. We removed that, understanding again that there might be different case planning curriculums out there that might not speak specifically to a 4-step process, but it includes the same processes within that are included with engaged, review, interventions, homework, next steps. So we don't want to specifically call it 4-step processes. We know case planning, case planning process is there might be different models out there. So we're just not necessarily boxing it in with that specific language. Adding in a number 2 here, for supervised release clients who are eligible to receive earned compliance credit, the agent will utilize the initial supervision goal to begin development of the case plan. Moving into context standards, adding in some specifics, some feedback. Clients must complete a minimum of 30 days on each supervision level. So this is just a standard, hey, show us compliance for 30 days. And that's when kind of maybe some benchmarks that agents where they start making some adjustments to supervision intensity. Coming down to transition planning. In red there, you'll see this is my addition as well as some other modifications. So that person will remain on supervision for 1 year until expiration of sentence, whichever is less. However, clients may be eligible for early transfer from ISR to supervised release based on the following. So the language below that has not changed, but providing a little bit more clarity to the length of supervision for an ISR client. Moving into B here, I think we had 4 months, and I think that was probably reflective on prior language that we had, not realizing that we don't necessarily start that process 4 months in, but generally 60 days prior to a transfer investigation. That's generally the process you would start engaging with that transition with an individual. So this just aligns with some of the case planning process and our transfer process with individuals from ISR to traditional supervision. Under the supervision standards, I did not highlight this, but I will do that right now. I had supervised release board in the supervision standards. This should stand alone because this isn't necessarily supervision standard. This specifically is relating to a process that's in place regarding those that have been released by the supervised release board and communication notification process to our executive director hearings and release unit. It's just more or less if there's a significant change in their supervision to alert our hearings and release director of any of those changes. From there, I think that kind of concludes the majority of it. The other addition was adding IPV reunification principles. I made some not language changes to some of the documents in there, more or less just more of a click and add dialog box to some of the documents there. I think on the transition transfer request, I think at the bottom of it had Hennepin County. We did use the same form, made some modifications to it, but I think the footer still had Hennepin County footer on that. So that was a change made. So nothing of any substance to that specifically. So some of the feedback that we took into consideration, I want to just maybe Becca specifically with the victim notification and communication with victims. We want to follow the same process within Haven. For those victims that want to be notified, I think one of the suggestions was if an individual changes intensity levels, and we reviewed the language within Haven, and specifically that pertained more toward like changes in their release status, warrant status, really just whether or not they're in the community or not. We can certainly explore conversations with Liz Richards, and if that's a direction to go, but ideally, is that something that would be just for ISR, or that be for all supervised releasees through Haven and that notification process in regards to intensity? Because you might have a MNSTAR high risk individual that goes to a low risk. And so do we want to make that more consistent with all supervised releasees, or just call out specifically ISR? So we kind of tabled that, added some language in the front end of the release planning policy, or part of the policy in regards to engaging with the victim as part of that process. So we want to kind of honor some of the suggestions there as much as we could, yet look at kind of what the current process is in place with our Haven and our notification processes within Haven, which is an automated notification. One of the other suggestion was family involvement in transition planning. Within the transition guide, it does call out who within an individual's life is going to be a part of that transition or support person. So we do have the element of kind of including family, if applicable, obviously, with the individual, to ensure that we identify those individuals that would be a part of their transition and their success upon transitioning from intensive supervision to supervised release, or to expiration. So we want to make sure we are addressing that and identifying those support individuals as part of their transition plan. I think that summarizes all the changes.
All right. Thank you so much, Jake. All right, so I'll open it up for discussion. Yes, Kevin.
Thank you. Jake, question on the contact standards. Is there anything in place? So say somebody's works their way down to very low intensity and then has 2 positive UAs or 3 or whatever. Not enough to, like, you're not going to send them back to prison, but like you need to increase that supervision.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something in place that they can be moved up?
Yeah, it serves as a continuum, Kevin. So if somebody is let's say earned their way to low intensity, the agent could increase them to a medium intensity. So it serves as a continuum, and it's not like you're capped, you can't go upwards. So that continuum does work in both directions. So as the agents review on a weekly basis, if they see accountability issues, chemical use issues, that might lean them towards increasing supervision to provide more direct services, more intervention work, CBI intervention work that needs to be done, potentially referrals to relapse prevention services, etc. So it doesn't restrict the agent's ability to move them up and down on that curriculum.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I just want to thank Jake. Jake, this is Will. I don't know if you can see me.
Oh, hey, Will.
I want to thank Jake. He met with us and discussed a lot of these changes, and we ran the proposals by a lot of folks that have been on ISR. And so, Jake, maybe you can speak to those 2 main things. The one thing that came up was if you released into one county, you might not be on ISR, but if you released in a different county, you would be. And a lot of people felt that was quite arbitrary. And then the other big thing that came up, and I think our memo was included in your packets before, was not only about concerns of the person reoffending, but threats to the person, which are difficult to talk about. But one of the things we're really working on this year is keeping people alive on supervision. And we've got a couple policy briefs coming out on violence against people who are on supervision, which is unfortunately very high. And of course, overdose, which is our next one. And I think, Jake talked through some of these changes. They can't all be in policy necessarily, but what we heard from people is that case planning, while people are still incarcerated, is so important to identifying threats. One of the big things that came up, and I think people that I run with tend to romanticize community, but in some of these cases, community is a threat to the person, and they need to be relocated to a different place. And so just wondering if you could address those, Jake.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I appreciate that. Well, because I did have a note here in relation to responsivity and some of the concerns that we discussed as well. So I think one of the things that we'll emphasize, I know when we roll out the policy at our ISR conferences, utilizing specific scenarios, like we mentioned with you and Zeke. related to individuals that, identifying that conversation with an individual, whether it's during the pre-release planning or through supervision, and incorporating that particular responsivity factor in relation to their fear or concern or fear of victimization as part of how do we address that through supervision. So yeah, how do you write that into a policy very specifically, but at the same time, how do we practice that in how we do case planning, how we address responsivity with an individual? So I know that definitely is one of the scenarios we want to include, or one or two scenarios, I should say, through our release planning and our case planning processes with as we apply kind of these standards at the ISR conference. And I think it needs to be in the forefront in our conversations with our ISR supervisors, and down to our ISR agents, as that needs to be on the forefront and how we communicate that specifically with individuals. That being said, relocating an individual isn't always like the easiest thing to do. But I mean, that should definitely be a conversation in scope as we work with individuals that do have fear of returning back to their neighborhood. How do we work with an individual? We do have a lot of resources in North Metro with attic housing. We have DLC housing throughout for our DLC counties, and opportunities to do that. Now, what may stand in the way, might be the individual might be a level 3 registrant, or there might be victim-related concerns that placing somebody puts them closer to their victim, but away from we put them closer to their victim or closer or away from concern of being victimized. We have to balance that out, and so I think that is definitely falls in that realm of responsivity and how we want to work with individuals that are in that particular space. So I think that needs to be practiced through skills, through our skill practice and through our case planning processes to identify those specific responsivity factors.
Yeah, I think these were very difficult conversations that we had internally too, because they're hard to talk about. I mean, you don't want your agent probably saying, or the case planner saying, does your girlfriend want you dead when you're released? But these are the things, does your girlfriend's family more or less want you dead because you victimized, right? So, and Zeke brought up suicide too, and that's really hard to talk about. But he talked about, Zeke Kellegery, who I work with, is good about talking about these things, but I'm not sure everybody else is. So we don't necessarily have the answers, Jake, but everyone said these things have to be talked about, but have to be talked about in a way that is sensitive as well.
Yeah, and I think part of that is through practice. You have to practice that. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think that's a kind of a mantra we keep trying to implement with our staff too. Is that at the end of the day, I mean, is it that where we have like our agents working with our level 3 registrants, level 2 registrants, we're talking about sexual fantasies. We're talking about things like that as well with these individuals. So I don't know if that necessarily is going to be a hard conversation with individuals, but to ask somebody, do they feel like they want to harm themselves? We have to practice that. We have to work that into a natural conversation we have with a client, and recognizing those warning signs, as well as having that conversation is there any concern you have, for your own safety? If we're comfortable talking about, sex offense cycle behavior, we have to make that comfortable having that conversation as well with an individual regarding those factors. It's just the same.
Other questions or feedback?
Yes, I have a question. Who can be part of the case plan process? So I have a house, the Black Butterfly House, and women are released from Shakopee, the CIP program, to my home. And a lot of times I don't know anything about what's discussed before they enter my home. How could I be a part of that conversation?
And that would be a collaborative effort with the agent and yourself, or a house manager, whomever that is, to essentially what we want to do is we all want to be on the same page in reality to case plan goals. So for you, for a specific example, Amber, so you may have some goals that you're working on with the individuals you have housed there. What goals do we have? How can we align them together? And I think that's just more or less having direct outreach and having our agents making communicating more closely with the housing resource or case management happening at those homes. So we're not fighting each other on goals, but we're aligning and trying to not overwhelm as well as not overwhelm an individual with goals as well. So I think that's an outreach from the agent to you, and vice versa, you to the agent, saying what are the goals they're working on, what are the risk areas that they have. We have to do we all have to do a better job at that. I mean, I think when it comes to collaborating with our providers, we have to work together more to share where are those criminogenic needs areas, what are the case plan goals that we are working on with the individual, and sharing them with those providers as well. So we're not, we don't have 10 goals going on. An individual doesn't have 10 goals on their plate, which is going to be too overwhelming for our very high risk individuals. So I think that just speaks more to our, engaging with the community, especially with like release planning. If they're release planning to, your residents, how can you be included with release planning and then having that conversation about case plan goals? So I think that's another area that we still have to work together on, how we communicate with our providers and align goals together, so we're not necessarily fighting goals. I don't think we're going to have conflicting goals. We're just going to have too many goals for an individual, because focusing on employment, healthcare, et cetera. Meanwhile, we're focusing on peers, family, et cetera, and other areas. Now you've got 5 or 6 goals going at a time. It becomes overwhelming. We want to stay to 1 to 2 goals for an individual at a time.
Not seeing any. Thank you, Jake. Appreciate that. A lot of amazing, excellent work, a lot of back and forth. Appreciate the very thoughtful, taking in all that feedback and then working with a lot of different people across our systems to come up with this product. So again, thank you for all that work and leading that work.
Yeah, and if we're ready for like one more round of review, would it be possible to bring this to a vote in April?
Yes, that was exactly where I'm going. Thanks, Jake. So,
okay. I'm not eager or anything, Molly.
I've been working on this for a while. I didn't mention that as well. So
okay.
I know for us, we have a meeting this week. We are happy to bring it back so that we're prepared in April to vote. I will look to everybody else on this committee to make sure this timeline works to put it on in April for a vote.
Excellent.
Is there a disagreement that won't work for your representative?
I just also have to echo that I've been working with Jake on this. He has been very collaborative. I'm reaching out to folks that I wasn't always thinking about. I just think you've done a great job with this. This is true collaboration and really, I think, a great product. So I'm in support.
Not hearing any objection to that timeline, we will then put it on for a vote in April. And there is anything else, though, that does come up, then get it to you again, Jake, by like mid or so.
Yeah, if possible, and then if we could just address those changes at the meeting and vote on it, that would be fine. I was just going to mention, maybe Don, I'll send the most updated version, what you saw, if you're comfortable with just leaving the highlights there which highlight those changes, and so the version that was sent out with the agenda here, I can have Don, if that's okay, resend out that's the version to review.
Thank you. Yes, that would be great.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you. Then we will move on to agenda item 4, which is to discuss the feedback on task sequencing, priorities, and timelines. That is Erin and
Thank you. So I believe last month we had reviewed the mapping document and sequencing document of all of the tasks and deliverables for the different subgroups and subcommittees. And so we can bring that up, but we wanted to bring it back to this group because I know we had sent out the updated documents to the 3 delivery systems, and first just wanted to hear if there is any feedback based off of any of those meetings over the last month, and then ultimately, really among this group, do we have the right sequencing for these priorities? Do we have the right timelines? And if not, really determining what those look like in reality. So among the 3 delivery systems, if you have any feedback to share, I think that would be wonderful to hear.
I can do
Anyone else pop in? Do you have stuff?
I do, but go ahead. Right, feel free.
Okay, so the first one that, so I'm looking at the sequence mapping document. And the first section that gives me a little pause in terms of the sequencing is the risk and needs assessment section. I think that and the reason is because the policy for when we would use risk assessment is like into 2026. And I don't really understand why we can't get the policy drafted and just set up the implementation of that to be delayed rather than the actual policy. And my concern is I would like this administration to have the chance to put that policy into place. And if we push it out too far, we may not have that chance. So I want to make sure that we get the structure in place. I'd be totally open to, just like we were talking with case planning, you know, about saying, but if there's any part of it we can't do right away, here's when it would go into effect. Just like we have the MRA policy posted right now, but it doesn't go into effect until later this year. I would like us to try to get that base policy done. I don't know if people have feedback on that before I go on to the next one.
Kelly, do you have an exact timeline for when to like have it finished and posted? And maybe
yeah, well,
you said
all
this
of
and I
the
missed
policies, like the commissioner asked for all of the policies to come to CSAC in July. Sure. And then, you know, so that we could work on trying to get them finalized by the end of the year. So I don't see a reason why that one can be on the same timeline. Now I recognize that also is saying use a pre-screener or LSCMI, and we don't have a pre-screener. That's when we have to delay implementation, right? But if we have the policy in place, then it's a matter of when do we pick it up, or we get creative about using the LSCMI felonies at least, or something. I don't know. I know people don't even use that on all felonies, so that's a stupid example. But just that would be my preference. Would be just like keep it with the July timeline, like all the other policies, and then we, as CSAC, we can then recommend and talk about the implementation timeline.
And from a MACAC response, and Becky, please chime in. I mean, I'm jotting it down to talk about this week again. I could imagine it's the things that you just briefly mentioned, which is draft is fine, most likely, I would imagine. It's always what are the resources per county? We're not fully funded. Like, can we pull off what we ideally would want in a draft policy, depending on the who? How many of these can we do? What ends up, like you said, we don't know the pre-screener. Is there a cost? What does that mean? Or are we building our own, et cetera, right? Like all of those, but to create a framework for what we know is best practice around, you know, I think we'll talk about it, but I think it's a good point to take this. I don't have more thoughts on that, but nodding, so. All right, thumbs up.
Okay, so then going down to the case planning one, this is actually just a point of feedback. I actually wondered if there's like 3 policy-ish things there in that first section. And I wondered if we would be driving towards just one case planning policy that has all that stuff in it. So that doesn't have to change anything on here, but it does seem to me like it should just be one policy. So that would be my recommendation there. Give me a sec, because I'm looking for my little notes thingies. Okay, so then down to number 5. I honestly do think getting the policies developed and drafted is our highest priority. And so while I think number 5 is extremely important, I would delay that a little bit in favor of getting the policies through. So if that's what we need to do to make the space to get policies through, I would want to delay this or not have the pressure on for this one to be done in July. But I also recognize that all they're doing in July is recommendations, not actually the how are we doing this piece. So I can also leave it here. I just wanted to raise that as like, if I'd had to choose, I want to get those policies through first and then get this in place a little bit later, or give more time for them.
So I think from that perspective, we talked about that at MACAC too. At least the reps that we have that were present last month thought, since it is just recommendations and there's so many people like on that EBP advisory and subgroups and things, that if it is recommendations, you two are on those too. So correct me if I'm wrong, but like they thought we could probably do that if that's like you said, the scope of it is just to bring back recommendations. There's no for discussion to move forward, because then if we need to kick out actual decisions or implementation or policies around those, that could go longer. I didn't hear strong, did you? Yeah, I didn't hear strong. It was more that like, let our resources tell me, can you come up with recommendations? Yeah, if I'm kicking it down, if you're saying it's not possible, but if you're saying it's possible, then we're open to hearing what you come up with by July 1st. That was where we landed.
I feel the same way on that one. So that's totally, I just wanted to raise it so that works for me. And then the number 6 is, sorry, I have like a lot of feedback. I was in a hearing yesterday, so I had a lot of time to take notes. Number 6, continue on a comprehensive grid for all behavior response grid for all people, or for all systems. So for this one, I'm torn because I think, again, like this is the thing you do when you have the other pieces in place, the case planning, the assessment, all of that stuff, and then this is more of the how do you do day-to-day stuff. And so if we're choosing what we can do, I would want to prioritize policy, getting the policies written through over this. Here again, though, I think CSG is providing support on this, and so that also conflicts with like we need to use their time while we have their time. So again, I'm like just raising the question about whether this is the right timing for this piece. I think it's recommendations again, though. It's not the final. So I don't know.
Just because I had the privilege of sitting at JRI yesterday.
Welcome back anytime, Allie.
We hosted, and so I was so used to going to all these meetings, I showed up, and so there we go. I don't know how you want to manage our agenda items with, like, you know what I mean? Like, you're just kind of naturally roll with it.
This is great.
Yep. So, no, I think that was the conversation that I heard yesterday from our JRI subgroups on these topics, which was, well, it's all of it, but really where does this fit in? And is it, we're trying to do this, you know, while we have CSG support, is this really, we can do this on our own later, and trying to figure that out and wanting perhaps guidance from all of us here, CSAC, to think about what makes sense, I guess, in that space. And your comment about case planning, combining those two things, I'm just going to kind of synthesize these. The overall point is, can we create high-level policies? Theoretically, I think you could do it on a response grid too. Just like if all we're doing is what we're talking about is really high level, what are the guiding principles? You need to use one, right? But not be prescriptive in the exact, like you have to use this case planning curriculum, this exact grid.
Sure. Is there going to be a policy involved?
Correct. And so, or is it a placeholder if it's just a draft policy we're trying to come up with, you know, how all these things integrate?
Yeah.
I think there's room for both of those. I mean, I think that came up on both sides of it, right? Like, do we push again this timeline out? Is it fine that it's just, you know, the implementation is what's delayed, right? But maybe it's still creating that framework for how does this fit into our overall case management process? So did I capture some of that?
I think so. Yeah, and we have for both case planning and the grid in our working group meeting, we have a smaller group of folks from all 3 delivery systems that are going to work on this work over the next few months, based off of these current timelines. I do believe with the grid, it's just continuing work and bringing some recommendations back in July. And so I think from our standpoint, at least from a workload standpoint, I think our working group could handle that. But the policy piece, I think, is still, that hasn't been defined as far as when that's due or what that time frame looks like, based off of the DOC commissioner report, if I remember correctly.
I think it's because there wasn't enough information to know if there would need to be policy. Because if it's a totally voluntary tool that everyone can use, here's what it looks like, then you don't need a policy. But if it's you should use this, then it's like, okay, so then is everybody using it? Is everybody using the same tool? Maybe variation in the tool? Like then that's where it's like what there would have to be a policy framework if there's an expectation that everyone is using it. So that's where there's no, I think we're still waiting on a recommendation overall on this to know whether there should be a
Right, so yeah, so there was a small, for both the case planning policy and for the response grid with the July date in mind, and nobody seemed, July date in mind. They didn't seem overly concerned, again, the draft and recommendation and all of those sorts of things felt doable to the groups and the folks that volunteered. And so we could just, I mean, it probably doesn't, in a couple months, they come back and say, well, we really did think so, but we can't, that we couldn't return some feedback to the commissioner even in, right? Like May or early June saying, hey, you know, this is where we're at, et cetera, and you have that progress report. I would imagine that's a possibility.
Well, I think with our, Stefra and I were actually talking on the drive over, and we have that monthly reporting form now for each of those work groups. And I think we have an area right now for like challenges or like issues. And that's something, especially because her and I are so ingrained with all of those working groups. If we start seeing, to your point, Molly, in May, June, it's like, there is no way this is going to happen by July. We can raise the red flag and be like, hey, we need more time here. This isn't something that's going to really be feasible, and keep this group up to date. Now, I would say that that's probably universal across all the committees and things, but.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just a minor thing on the will pursue language and statute. I just wanted to clarify for the whole group that the commissioner's response on all of the language changes was that they had been communicated to the legislature, but not that the TOC was taking those forward necessarily. So I just don't want expectations to be there that may not be there. We just don't have the ability to represent CSAC in that way on all of the issues, especially the one we're trying to say that DOC could make the final decision.
We can make that language change in the document too, just so you can know that.
Yeah.
This is something that's communicated, but not necessarily filed in formal legislation.
Yeah, but all of it was communicated to the legislature, and that's in statute. So the DOC did do that. I just wanted everybody to be really clear on that. I think I hit them all because the language changes apply across the board, or all of those, and then. Oh, and then the only thing I was gonna say was the ones that are there's two places where the workload study is represented on here, and that's because that's how it is in statute as well. And I just wanted to make sure that we understood that we do have a workload study subcommittee, and that they are the ones in the charge on that work across the board. So it wasn't totally clear. There was some places where it seemed like it wasn't happening. So I just wanted to make sure that both of those are.
Is there a point of contact for that committee or
That's
work group?
Jake.
Oh, all right, Jake.
He'll be talking later.
Perfect.
Agenda, right? Yeah.
We'll be chatting later, Jake. So.
And I think that was it for my feedback, and I really appreciate you putting this together because it really does help. Oh, the only other thing, I'm sorry, last one, I missed one. In the risk and needs tool, it says validate the LSCMI and the pre-screener, and the project we have going right now is only to validate the LSCMI. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. We're still in the process of deciding what a pre-screener would be, and then once we get there, then that would be in the future. But thank you. It's awesome.
Great.
I love it.
Yeah, and we'll make perfect. No, and that's the intent, and we'll make those updates with some of the modified the policies and things So then everything is clear, and then we'll make sure that the monthly reports match that, the work plan matches that, everything is consistent across the board. But yeah, I mean, this was the feedback we were hoping to hear, and just making sure that these timelines are going to work. And like I said, I think in our monthly reporting, we can make sure that we just have that indicator of, is this work on track or is it not? And do we need to maybe modify that timeline and bring it back here? You know, I think we can communicate that and do that. So. Was there any other feedback around sequencing and priorities?
Not really. I would say that, again, I echo the appreciation for the tools, you know, starting from Don's originally and then the ones that you did. And
Don's the OG over here.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Very helpful. It's gotten a lot of, positive support. And I think that very similar to, you know, Kelly, what you mentioned too, is, you know, this is at the highest level what we're working on, just like the ISR policy that we just reviewed, or in other spaces, MRRA, that iterative process. And it's really about what ends up being co-created, and then that discussion, you know, once we see like a proposed draft policy for recommendations on implementation, right? So it's right now, this is great, right? I mean, it makes sense, and we're all aligned, and we believe in this work, and this is great. And so go forth, right? And it takes all of us in the state and all these wonderful people on all these committees to help us get there. And so just kind of, I think that's just, keep communicating back and forth, and probably more discussion comes once we start to see, right, some of the detail, I guess, or some of the suggestions. And then the only other thing I'd say is just that this came up again yesterday at the JRIs. What's the difference between policy versus some of that really detailed implementation? And I know we've talked about it here, but just trying to keep that understanding, because not everybody's at this table. So when we're making those suggestions, right, assisting so that we don't have people right now from developing what, you know, is appearing to be policy, you know, for them, which really isn't what maybe we intended. And so as much guidance as I think we can give will be helpful to as well, and helping to delineate that. But other than that, again, Becky, what am I missing from MACA?
You said that very well. I've decided I don't even need to talk at these meetings. I'm just going to. No, honestly, very nice.
Others, thoughts, questions, feedback on this? All right. Then, thank you. So we will move to agenda item number 5, discuss committee progress and feedback. And so we have the 3 different, the DB steering committee, the risk needs committee, and the EDP. So I don't know in what order, how I'll start here.
Yeah. So we have the work plan here that Don has pulled up, and as you know, we have the monthly reporting forms that are now sent out to all of the committees. And so this was something that we had looked at last month, added in additional columns around if there's policy and having a policy contact and things like that. But we did get our first month of feedback from the committees, which Sephora has added in here. And so all of these are updated. I don't know if it would be, and then the 3 here are like kind of some questions back to CSAC that we received from the committees. So I will look to the chairs or this group. I mean, would it be helpful to go through each of these items and like where progress is, or would you prefer to review this on your own?
My first gut reaction is a quick overview. But especially when you see a question for us, and
yes,
makes sense that we would.
In particular would be great. Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, I'll do a very quick overview of where we are with each of these deliverables based off of the feedback, and then we can dive into the specific questions. And so we have our statewide supervision standards, and we know the ISR policy here presented a policy draft in February. They have an updated draft today. So we've talked quite a bit about ISR there. I don't think we have to go too far into that. The IPV policy, that's a question that is coming back to CSAC, so I'm just going to put a pin in that one, and then we'll come back to it. The full set of supervision standards and the prioritization. So we continue to work with those working groups. We are currently compiling all of the supervision standards or supervision policies across counties. SEPRA has created a really nice spreadsheet that's essentially all of the raw data from these policies in a number of categories. And so we are doing a comparison across counties, across delivery systems. Where are supervision policies aligned? Where are they not aligned? Where are there gaps? And so we do have, we've received a number of them so far, but we do have listed here the counties that we are still receiving or waiting to receive policies on. And as SEPRA noted yesterday, this was updated on the 18th. So some of these counties are have submitted their policies.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Sorry, I'm just gonna be troubled today.
You're never trouble, Kelly. You're never trouble.
So I really apologize because I really wanted to be at as much of that meeting yesterday as I could, but my schedule wouldn't allow.
No worries.
So I was actually wondering sort of because we talked about what our supervision standard was in the past, and I'm sort of wondering like how even useful is it to look at everybody's policies? For me, what we're really driving for is like, what's the overarching policy frame that we want in place for supervision that everyone has to do? Mm-hmm. And then within, so I wouldn't expect like contact standards to be in these things, right? Because that's, I don't know, maybe I don't think it would be, but I think that it might be a little more high level. So the whole like, you know, you are gonna do a risk assessment on these types of cases, and then you are gonna case plan on these types of cases, like the expectations are there for those types of things. So I was just wondering, like,
and we're looking at pretty high level categories. So it's around risk assessments, it's around supervision levels. How many levels do you have across your county? So it's very, thank you. So we have a risk and needs assessment and frequency. This is why we make a good team, right? Like, I can read your mind, Erin, I got you. It's around pre-screeners, case planning requirements. So are you doing a case plan? Who are you case planning off of? Supervision levels and cutoff scores, overrides. Do you have incentive sanctions, violation responses? Do you have targeted needs? And then CQI and staff training. So those are the major categories. And the idea that we are working with is that we may not get everybody, but just get a general sense and take that raw data, make more of a summary document of here's where we stand right now, here's where we're aligned, here's where we're not aligned. And then SEPRA has, I thought this idea was great, but then also comparing that to like our APPA standards for supervision and overlaying that. And then using that as really the discussion and the vessel to start having conversations about what do we want that framework or that policy to look like.
That's great. That sounds great. Thank you.
Perfect.
No, but I appreciate that, Kelly, because what I do think that, because again, it's what are we hoping for, and is it, you know, does it exist in any of ours? Does it not? What are we recommending going forward? All that. The one thing, having looked at, not like you guys have, but several, was I think it's also educational. Know what has Hennepin doing? What is Rock Nobles doing as an example? Because it helps you get that like landscape of, oh, well, that makes sense over there because I don't have that kind of volume, or this makes sense, even though you might not set it like that, but like to understand, I think where we're all operating from, at least as a starting point, can just be helpful for informing us going forward is what I've found. But also hear what you're saying too. That makes sense.
When you're implementing, you want to know where are they starting at,
Right.
You know, and how big a list is going to be to get them to change.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Exactly it. I guess that you said it better than I did, or more directly. You said it more directly, which I appreciate, actually. Yes.
Effort among all of us.
Because sometimes there are assumptions that are made. Let's be, you know, and it's like, oh, we're all doing case. Well, okay, I think we all want to be doing all sorts of things, and what have we been able to do is very different. So I think that's why we're here talking about it. Yeah.
I think it's important for buy-in and feeling part of this, that maybe to a little more distant in this committee or the representation. I mean, it's just good to do. We collected it, looked at it, again, not studied it in depth and made a 82-page graph of all the different things, but just to at least issue spot those things that Molly talked about. I just think there's something good about that buy-in. I appreciate that.
right. I think you can keep moving on.
All right, we're moving on.
By the way, sorry for in the room because I'm noticing. So at restrooms, you're badging. So if there's a visitor badge thing, you're going to go out this door to the left and then to the right. There's restrooms and then come back in. I meant to say that in the beginning. So. All right.
So then we have our risk and needs side of things. I think, we've touched on this a bit already, but we have the LSCMI validation work, which I know is also on the sub-award here, but that's starting to move forward, it sounds like. Lots of conversations around the pre-screener tool, which is ongoing. So we have some identification for those areas. And then the offense specific, the trailer tools. And so there's been more discussion among that working group. So that work continues. I don't know if you want to speak more about that.
I was just going to make a note that I did receive the DOC policy, the draft blank policy. So I do have that. I know that it says there's something on here for that, but I just wanted to let you know I do have that now.
And then we do have a question from the Risk and Needs Committee around the MinStar 3.0 work, but I'm, again, just going to put a pin in it, and we will come back to it after we've done the full review. And then looking at case planning, that working group met yesterday, and as I mentioned earlier, now we have one policy instead of three, so thank you. That's going to make their lives much easier. But we do have a small subcommittee from that working group that's going to start drafting that policy. We were able to go through the framework that we had developed already last fall, which is, to Molly's point, more of like the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty of all the case planning. And so they're going to use that as a discussion point, but really that policy will be more high level and have more of the framework for case planning versus here's the day-to-day nitty-gritty of it all. And then we also did talk about metrics in that group, so that will be part of that discussion for that smaller subcommittee. Deliverable 5 on the EVP Statewide Advisory Committee, their key activities this past month is they've established a subcommittee to help address this deliverable. First meeting was scheduled for yesterday, so hopefully that happened. And they are currently reviewing literature and sharing amongst the group to prepare for that meeting.
Can I ask? So this one is broken down into 2, but as far as I know, it's really just the first one. Like,
just
I think that
work.
developing a statewide training was one of the ideas that we thought was a potential outcome of all of this group's work, but nothing that formally recommended or adopted. Like, I like, because when they came to us in November, they had like some ideas, and we said, great ideas, keep working on it, and bring us back a recommendation, and not to tell the commissioner. So that's why I was a little confused as to why there's 2 things already here.
Is there 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one should just be the one, it looks like. So we'll make a note of that. And I think
eventually we'll say, yeah, let's have a statewide training.
Let's have a training, right. Yeah. I think, Jake, are you the point of contact for this one? Am I remembering?
Yes. Yep. And if you just want a quick update, we did meet yesterday. And our task isn't, for the gender cultural and trauma informed. Yeah, baseline training might be a recommendation that comes out of that. It's not a specific task standalone. I think so. That's correct, Kelly, by saying that. So yeah, we did meet yesterday. Had a really good meeting. Kind of what we're doing, trying to align our compass in a direction. Really focusing on technical changes versus adaptive shifts in relation to implementation or recommendations around those 3 particular areas. So I think we're on the right track. We're going to reach out to some individuals out in I think East Coast, Christine Cicero, and some other folks to come in who have experience with policy development and others locally as well. So I think we want to bring in folks that can help kind of align a broad perspective recommendation into not just, a training perspective, but also like how do we change the culture around these 3 responsivity factors and how they're embedded within our current core trainings, for example, looking at the 5 core trainings that we've adopted here at CSAC, how are those 3 particular elements embedded in the training in and of itself? Are we doing a good enough job there to really exercise those skills or highlight those particular responsivity areas in relation to how it's being trained at the base level? So that's the direction we're kind of looking at things right now. And I know when we talked as a group, July 1st is a pretty, it's going to be here before you know it. So I think by May we should have a pretty good sense. Will we hit that benchmark or not? If not, I think if it's permissible to provide, hey, September, or here's where we think we'll have formal recommendations. But I think we're coming at this with an aggressive approach and trying to give some recommendations by July.
Thank you. Perfect. All right. And then deliverable 6 around the behavior response grid. Sort of alluded to it earlier, but that working group met yesterday, and there's a smaller subcommittee. We reviewed what the current framework that we had developed in the fall looked like, but there's a smaller, I was going to say cross-divisional, but cross-delivery system subcommittee that will be working on developing some of those recommendations moving forward. So that is the update there. We did have one question for that, but we will put a pin in it. And then we have the performance indicators. There's no committee there. And then the statewide training, coaching, and QA. So we have the 2 policies here and the key activities. So they reviewed the CSAC recommendations and the commissioner's response, discussed what is needed going forward. They do have a couple questions, but Kevin, I know you are the point of contact for this group, I think. If you had any other updates for this group before we dive into the questions specifically.
No, we did meet already. We have another meeting coming on in the beginning of April to discuss this further, and then bringing it back to the larger EBP work group or committee as well. And then if you want me to get into the question, I can.
Yeah, I was just going to say the other deliverables are like no committee assigned, or it's more of a statute, and then the workload study, which I know Jake is going to speak to later. So yeah, Kevin, I think if you want to dive into your question, that would be great.
Yeah, so this just might be us overthinking the ask of this. And so the commissioner asked in his written response to develop policy to support the recommendations that all Minnesota community supervision agencies provide training, coaching, and quality assurance review of the 5 identified skill areas. And so our ask on this work group is, are we looking at this high level and just saying in policy, like each agency will do this, or do we want to get more specific and put in like minimum standards for coaching? Coaching shall take place at least 1 time a year, or quality assurance, or are we just leaving it the broad high level overview, or do we want to get some foundation base level of a minimum?
I guess I would say that if we go back to the recommendation from this committee to the commissioner, that the way that we stated it there was probably the base for the policy. And then it's really up to the committee to determine if more detail is needed in that policy, or if that is implementation, if that's handled in the implementation plan rather than the policy.
Yeah, with any of these topics, it seems to me the quantity, you start to get into like quantity or exact curricula or whatever, that starts to get into, versus saying you need coaching, or you need these things, whatever these guiding principles are, you need to speak to them in your jurisdiction. Again, it might look slightly different perhaps, or not, but I mean, so yeah, I think on almost every one of these topics, the same kind of thing could be said. And if you feel differently or want to bring something forward, that's fine. Then we discuss it back and forth, but not to get over prescriptive, I guess.
I mean, like the original report basically said, you know, every agent needs to be trained within the first year on these 5 things, right? So that should be in the policy, and then everyone has to have ongoing education and coaching of this many hours per year. Like those are definite policy statements. So that should be in the policy. And then I think it's up to your group to figure out if we need any more detail there, or if that's, you know, if you're getting into implementation, because that's like, once the policy is in place, then you have to actually figure out how it gets implemented across the state. And there's going to be more detail at that level.
Or the other thing I know we've talked about is some of those can be those guides. Like, here's some guides as you implement. Here's some ideas. Here's some styles. Here's what coaching may look like, right? I mean, and I think there's some really amazing work, and we've seen that work here in those more comprehensive packets that get into that, which could be like tools, right, that we have at the state level to be able to look further into it when we're doing this. Not necessarily the policy, except for, again, the things that you just mentioned.
Yep. Like the ISR policy was an example of Jake is going to attach the IPV reunification principles to the ISR policy as a guide, right?
Yeah, and I was, you know, I know Kevin, you and I spoke about this too, but I think, you know, in from a policy standpoint, you know, agencies are responsible to implement, just for example, implement coaching and quality assurance measurements, you know, includes but not limited to, and then you could provide, from a coaching perspective, coaching circles, MI tapes. You could provide a lot of those things that do serve as a coaching tool, which could include coaching guides, a coaching model, a coaching whatever that could be used as potential options. Quality assurance measurements could be in the form of the, you know, LSCMI peer reviews. It could be the form of communities of practice, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's not prescriptive, but you know, I don't know if it's palatable to put language in there like that, like includes but not limited to, because agencies might find something, and you might be the agency that has epics, and there might be a coaching tool or a quality assurance tool that comes with that, and that you can use to implement within your agency. So everybody's responsible to do that. Here are the resources and tools that are available. But even like from a perspective of engagement with the EBP unit or whatever that may be. But I think that's kind of the way I envision it, is how providing some guidance within the policy, the expectation and the guidance, but not prescribing coaching circles is what you use. It could be a multitude of many different coaching options that are available that could be provided as a guide within the policy.
Yeah, and I wasn't necessarily looking for specifics with that. I totally understand. Just maybe looking in general, like each agency should minimum one time coaching 1 time a year. I mean, I know like other agencies are doing it 2 times a month, right? Or more.
That was like that's so you have to go back to our report too, because that was in there, like that was addressed. So make sure that you're reading it again to get the, I mean, we like your group brought forward a recommendation and we accepted some of it and modified some of it. And so you really have to go back to the report that we submitted to the commissioner for the documentation of what we recommended, and the commissioner supported our recommendation. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and I did see that, but there wasn't a specific, so we can leave it the high level. That's fine. I was just looking for clarification.
Okay. All right, so I think we can just move backwards up the list. So the other committee was around, or other question was around the risk and needs committee for deliverable number 2, and so there was an additional recommendation or additional request from the DOC commissioner to study and make recommendations for formal integration of the Minster 3.0 for supervised release or ISR. And I know the risk and needs working group had some discussion last week, and then internally from us at the Justice Center had some discussion as well. But a question for all of you, right now we have this under the risk and needs working group as their responsibility, given that we felt that this was more of an assessment-based recommendation. But as we're having more discussion, we're wondering, is it appropriate for it to live with the risk and needs working group? Or is this something that would be more appropriate for the JRI phase 2 work, given that they're responsible around supervision standards? And the MinStar 3.0 not only is an assessment, but there's also, as Jake talked about earlier, there's supervision ramifications as well. So really just trying to have some clarification to make sure that we have the right group working on this task, and wanted some input from all of you.
I can see on these two elements. Becky, I'm going to start with you. Would you like to speak on behalf of Matt? I think I would, and then I will fill in the gaps, if any, which I'm sure there won't be any, because you're also an amazing.
No pressure. Oh my gosh. I think we've had some discussions, of course, about how does the MinStar fit in with the supervision standards, knowing it's a risk, obviously. And so that's going to get us a starting point. But then how do we supervise can be different, obviously. If we can start with, for example, maybe a risk need tool, depending when someone administers that after release. So my first thought here, and I don't have some of my notes in front of me, Molly, so I got to look back here to make sure I'm accurately reflecting MAC, but it does seem to fit in supervision standards and JRI if that group is working on that to me, but I got to look back at my notes.
Becky's so nice. It's so great to be a team. No, I would agree with that. I think it does make sense there. I know that whether it's the pre-screener or the MinStar 3.0 in this instance or suite, I think we would request that there's, again, some outside people involved so that we make sure that it's a collaborative effort, that all three systems, I guess, are weighing into this. And so I don't know if I know that's not in scope with the validation at one point, or the LSCMI and the workload piece of it, which you commented on, like whether or not the screener, as an example, would come out of that or be designed in that or be validated. Is that external? If it is something else, I think I know MACAC would want to have more conversations about what that looks like. If there's a cost to it, we don't have any way to pay for it. Is there a way that we can seek that out then? Whether it's studying the MinStar or it's creating or validating a pre-screener, making sure so that there's kind of that transparency in that process. What does that look like? And then again, the assistance, I think, from, again, a non-biased outside person to help us navigate these particular spaces. So that's, I guess, the additional piece to that.
Me, find the one thing I wish I knew the answer to this. I think we're getting an outside evaluator from STAR. Oh, so I think I think we already have that RFP out. Okay. So, but I'm sorry, it's not my division, so I have to, I would have to confirm that. But I do think, actually, I think it might be the same person who's going to do our LSMI validation. But I'll confirm that and get that and to an update next time. So I think the MinStar will be validated by an outside entity. We had we wanted the same things to happen. And then I think this question is really about putting it in, like you come out high on an MinStar, what level of supervision should you be in? So I do a supervision standards question, especially because we don't then we have like so then what do you do? So it's like it's kind of both because it's like you kind of have to. We have to make sure. I just want to make sure that our agents like have something to look at to be like, oh, that's why we're doing that, and like, oh, this is how we have to handle the fact that there's this person's coming out high on MinStar, but medium on the L. Like, why are we supervising them at a high level? It's that kind of assistance that they connect the dots. But supervision standards.
And then is it that group then, and it's also for how long? Like at what point? We know, again, that MinStar has a long from a risk perspective, but we also know, since it doesn't have the needs, that it may become antiquated because how the person behaved in prison and in the community is vastly different.
Yeah.
And then how does if it is a subsequent tool like LSCMI, does that get reversed back in terms of being like if you need to do a hearing? Because again, what tools are being used then from a reverse standpoint if needed is a question that MACAC has, and like who is the right group then to tackle that question as well. Not so much is the MinSTART valid in what it's trying to measure, it's how is it used in both, like initial case assignment is one thing, but then it's also this iterative process when the person's in the community with subsequent tools, and how do those things fit in policy? And just wanting to make sure, I think it's the piece on our multiple systems and making sure we have somebody that's giving us guidance, so everyone that's using all of these things really understands, I think, again, more of the broader case management perspective.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good question. I keep forgetting that one, and that's also one that we really have to tackle. If you have a violation later, what risk? The reason it matters for the rest of you is that when a person has a violation on supervised release, our hearings and release unit is looking at the risk level of the individual and the seriousness of the violation to determine, does this need a hearing or can we do a restructure right now? And so if those risk levels are different between the tools, then that creates a conundrum. And right now, our hearing solution is only going with the MinSTAR, even if it's like a couple of years out. So it's a valid question whether we should be looking at that differently in the future.
All right, well, that will go to the green category now.
All of that just to make it green.
Right.
It's good to have a process.
It's a good process. Not even true. And then the last question hopefully this is pretty straightforward, but when we have sent out, it's around the developing IPV policy. And I just want to bring up the email to make sure that I am stating everything correctly. So SEPRA had reached out to the steering committee responsible for this task and received kind of a question / a statement back from Liz Richards, who I understand is part of that committee. And she had said they are not planning on submitting a monthly report this month, but that the steering committee is not a formal part of CSAC, but they have offered to draft the initial policy related to the IPV reunification guidance work, and they are in the beginning stages of figuring out how that work will happen. And so I think we had sent out the email with, you have been formally tasked with this task, and just kind of received some feedback of like, well, I'm not really sure if that's like our role, but we were told this, but not told this. So it was suggested to maybe have a meeting between Liz and Nikki Engel from Violence Free Minnesota, who heads up the DV steering committee, just to understand everyone's role, the CSAC process, and how to coordinate. And just wanted to get feedback from this group to make sure that one, like we are saying the right things to the DV steering committee, but then two, if this group is okay with having some sort of meeting like that, if it's the Justice Center having that meeting or chairs from CSAC or what that looks like, just wanted to make sure that we are saying the right things moving forward and everybody is on the same
I can say I did meet with Nikki Engel maybe January or something when we first developed this great spreadsheet and everything, and I thought we were on the same page about them just developing that policy. But I mean, my understanding is that they are almost done with the training process in this. So I mean, I don't know how much more there is for them to do at this point to bring that across the line. But it'd be great to have someone from that group come to one of these meetings or something if they need more information from us.
I think we could do a meeting with Becca to be part of that. Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to Nikki too about if she wanted me to hop on the DV steering committee at any point or anything like that, but I don't know. I thought we had thought it was clear from.
Yeah.
I thought we had just talked about what we were doing and seemed in line and, yeah, I don't know.
So maybe just a meeting, just to set the stage and make sure everybody's on the same page. Sounds like Becca will be part of that.
Yeah.
Do you want the three co-chairs and Becca?
I think like whoever of us, at least one of us should.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy to do it, or I know you would be, or John.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's good.
If we can't get everyone, then one.
Okay. All right. So we will respond back, and then get that coordinated before the next meeting and get everything set.
Okay. Oh, Jake?
Has it been addressed, because we're canvassing all of our existing staff, has it been addressed for onboarding new staff in relation to the IPV reunification principles and how new staff are being onboarded with this training, or is there going to be some kind of e-learning of some sorts to onboard staff at some point in their career? I mean, we've got a lot of stuff for folks within the first month of their hire, but is there anything in relation to or developing power users or of some sort that we're not losing the new staff coming in on understanding these principles?
Question.
It would be great if that was part of, I mean, we have the principles, but then the policy should be just about implementation and training, right? Should be, we've got the current staff up to speed, but yeah, there should be an onboarding training that they receive. And that is a question for the DB committee of, did you record any of these? Or,
Yeah, that would be it. Yeah, if it could be recorded, vetted of some sort, and then that can be transitioned to an e-learning of some sort with a quiz or whatever, just to capture, because we've done this, we do this a lot. we change something, we canvas everybody, then how do we keep that relevant and that training ongoing? So yeah, I mean, if that's something that steering committee would be willing to address, and if they're comfortable with recording that, and and we can certainly work on if our communications unit would be willing to assist with that, and recording that, or employee development unit would be willing to help coordinate that. I think that would be a way to capture onboarding new staff too.
Also in line with us saying, 16 hours of ongoing development or that initial year of training. So we could, I don't know if it's there or something else, but certainly seems like a great thing to do. Yeah.
For monthly reports, I'm just thinking about this. I think Liz Richards was our original contact, but is Nikki more appropriate for updates? Seeing that she heads the steering committee?
Probably, yeah. And Liz has had a lot going on right now.
Okay.
MRA and
yeah.
She just took over some other entire department or something. So yeah, probably. Yes, probably.
Okay. Well, we'll make that change as well then.
Was there a question that was on the response group for CSAC that I sent?
Yes, there was.
It came up yesterday, I think, so I just.
Yes, it did. Where was that? Thank you for that. I think it came in after the agenda, and it was like, deliverable 6. There we go. So I think we've had this discussion a bit in the past as well. And as Molly noted, it came up again yesterday, but the idea of who is really the authority or source of truth for this work. And so we know that we have phase 2 that's working through this. We have MRA that's working through this work. We have some counties that are using a grid in some way, shape, or form, Wright County, Scott County, Ramsey County. And so I think a question just from that group is, is there any guidance that this group can give around who will be the kind of source of truth? What would that look like? Is it what phase 2 develops? Is it what MRA develops? We're coordinating with MRA currently, the phase 2 group, and we've met with all the other counties, Ramsey, Wright, Scott. But just trying to get some guidance, maybe some clarity on that piece.
Just add a little bit more context, or if you're new to this topic, it's behavior response, meaning the incentivizing behavior. So how do we kind of reward or affirm when people are doing well? And then what do we do that's proportional so that you don't have somebody that's it depends on your supervisor or your agency that is having grossly different like reactions from an accountability or a punitive standpoint, if you will, because, you know, so it's really, there's a lot of different guiding principles for why this is a best practice. So that we're balancing both. We actually hopefully are doing more positive reinforcing than not, and that we have some sort of guidelines around that. So this is national, and I think that's, you know, again, it gets into some of these other conversations sort of to run parallel to that, which is, well, Ramsey, Scott, like when having worked in Ramsey for 20 years, and they've been at this since I think 2012 till now, far longer than most or any of us really. When we designed ours, it was using a lot of what I learned in Ramsey and a lot of national standards. Ramsey was assisted by the state of Washington. We have Wyoming models, Wright County. So like there isn't again, it goes back to like, there's not like one that is, you have to use this one anywhere in the nationally. It's here are just like case planning or anything else. Here are the guiding principles. Here are what we need to do. And there are some base sort of like best practices around these that I think we can all get behind, just like we can, you need to be trained in those 5 areas, right? Or you need to, you know, use a case planning goal and use risk, need, responsivity principles. And the same is true for this, for those that haven't like, done a deep dive. So it isn't about Scott County model or Ramsey County model. It's about, are we doing this in a systemic way? And are we going to require that we're all doing something around this? But we have to, and the example I use, it's really the most kind of black and white is I don't have sentence of service as an option here in Scott County. Others do. Like you have to have the ability for agencies to say, we're using STS, it's a choice we're making in our jurisdiction as a particular response, and some others are not. So it's not like again, we aren't trying to over-prescribe, and so trying to kind of quell maybe some concerns about that, but saying, so the authority to me, you know, again, goes back to what is the authority on any of this? Well, are we just going to NIC? Are we going to spaces, APPA, spaces that are helping us design and develop these things? And what does it mean to have good practice around this? And then what do we want to do here in Minnesota? And then each individual, you know, agency, county, delivery system then kind of, you know, makes it fit for them within those guiding principles. So I don't know, it seemed like from yesterday, hopefully that was helpful to kind of re-gear, because it's not like Ramsey's doing something dramatically different than I'm doing, or Wright County or whatever else. It's really just saying, oh, okay, here it is. Here's the base. And then here's how we're going to try to, you know, make it work here. So anyways, that's really.
Yeah, and well, I was going to say, is she asking for really like who's the approval authority? Or I actually didn't understand this question at all.
Sure. Well, I think it's kind of coming from us as well, but I think Molly, you've answered some of it or most of it, but what I'm hearing is that it's more what phase 2 is doing is around this framework, these principles, guiding principles, but we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of here's what every grid should look like, right, per se. And so I think where we've had some discussion is we know that this work is being done in several areas. And so we just wanted a better understanding of if we put something forward from phase 2, is it ultimately, you know, is this group going to say, well, actually we want to go with what MRA is putting together, or we would like to stick with what Scott County is doing, or whatever it may be. So I think just having a better understanding of, I think Molly, you touched on it, is that there's not one that trumps all. It's more of the framework and the principles around work that this group is looking for.
And so the pause on the MRA, like, so if that work, because I know that was like, well, we want to do this all together. So some of the folks in the group, are they going to start and take off? And we, you know, so I think some of it was also in like authority is who is it? This group, is it, are we joining these two groups? So I think some of it
that was part of the reason to talk to Kate. She might be new enough in her role though to not understand where things are at. I don't even know.
Kate's been wonderful.
I don't even know if it's actually moving forward on the MRA side though. That's the question.
Right.
Like, I'm in the agency and I haven't heard those things. So
I mean, from our understanding, and we had conversations with Kate, we're actually going to lunch with Kate this afternoon, so, but what we had heard was that the institution side of things maybe has a grid that's moving forward, but the community side, that work had not started, and it was really unclear if when that would start. And so I think part of the question too, and you're helping me remember the entire discussion as we're talking here, but just making sure we're not duplicating work, and that if phase 2 or a different county like brings something forward, I don't want that work to then be duplicated by an MRA or just not have that communication line open. And I know that was part of the DOC commissioner's response, was that having phase 2 really coordinate with these other ongoing initiatives that are happening. And so that's where the connection with Kate and the MRA group has been very helpful. And Shakopee and Moose Lake, thank you.
So what happened in the past was I happened to be on the MRA policy planning meeting when they were like trying to think of a grid that would work for institutions and the community side. And I was like, no way, no, it's not gonna happen. And so at that meeting, we bifurcated those two efforts, and then I was like, you can do whatever you want in prison. That's not my jam. Like, go do what you want. Over here, we need to coordinate with our partners. So that's why it stalled on that side. We don't but since then, like that group that existed doesn't exist anymore, and MRA into implementation planning for supervision abatement. Mm-hmm. So what I do think, I had suggested that the group we needed to connect with was the implementation team for supervision abatement, and that's led by Carter Beers. So
yes, we do. Poor Carter. I'm very tired about it.
He's everywhere. So as we sort of continue this forward, I do think we really have to be cognizant of what's the ask for supervised release versus probation, because on the supervised release side, we will have supervision abatement coming into play. And I think we might want more uniformity there than less, so that people are able to earn abatement in the same way everywhere around the state. And if this is a part of how we work with them, then it feels like we have to think about doing it more of the same than not. But then that creates an issue because the same officers do probation. And so, or in some counties they do, the same officers also do the probation side. So if the county was like going in a different direction for the probation side, then we could create a lot of confusion. So that's where, to me, it gets a little like, I don't know how to do this. But those are the issues floating around in my brain. Yet I'm not going to get intimately involved in this, so I'm going to let you guys say that.
This is very helpful. I mean, I'm glad we just asked the question. And this is where really just having some more guidance from this group and understanding the dynamics, right? Like for us, I mean, we're working here and phase 2 is working, but I didn't realize the MRA group was no longer meeting. And so that's something that's super helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, because it was a policy development. Like there was an initial team to develop the policy, and the policies are all developed now. So that group ended, and then new teams were created to implement the policy. So they're a little bit different composition, and they finally split it off the institution side from the supervision side, which makes it so much better. Yeah. And then so they're working through this implementation issue. It is a little bit different there.
So it sounds like coordinating with Carter we should add to the list.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like one of the buckets they need to think about.
Okay, that's great. That's really helpful. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I almost blew right by it.
Is that so? I think that was it.
That is it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it for number 5.
Then number 6, we will move on to the status of the sub awards. So that's Kelly and Aaron.
I will start, and I guess then I'll look to Kelly for updates as well. But I think we had talked a bit about this last month with the subaward under our work, so under phase 2 and the risk and needs side of things. So just as a refresher, states are eligible for up to $500,000 in additional funding. And Minnesota put forward kind of 4 buckets of work that amounted to about just under $400,000. So used about 80% of those funds. Part of that is the validation work for the LSCMI. We have some technology enhancements in CSCS around case planning and incentives. So it's making that a more efficient and helpful, thank you, system. And then we have recidivism reporting and a master's trainer bucket of money. So as far as on the CSTS side of things, I can give an update there from our working group yesterday. So there is an implementation team that has, what was it, 40 some people? It's a very large group, but they are working through what that implementation looks like. They're working with the vendor at STI. So that work is started and is moving forward, which is wonderful. The master trainer work sounds like it's moving forward. And then the recidivism reporting is all part of those technology enhancements. We didn't have a rep yesterday in that group, so I do need to get an update, but my understanding is that work has started as well. So those 3 buckets, it's great. Very excited that this work is starting. I think I'd mentioned it last month as well, but we initially thought that the subaward would have to be spent by September of this year. And we have received an extension to next year. So all of that work and all of that money can happen until September of 2026, which gives your state a bit of breathing room, and we don't have a heart attack now trying to make this all happen in the next 6 months. So, and then Kelly, I suggested you here for the validation work, so I don't know.
I know, and I really wish I could say something different. I feel like a broken record. I literally checked on this yesterday. It was circulating for signatures when we met with the risk assessment group. And unfortunately, some of the people that get that in the end are out right now. And so we think it's been signed by all parties. But I don't have proof of that yet.
No proof of life yet.
Yeah. But I will say, going back, so I was able to attend the risk assessment group meeting this week, or whenever that was, recently. And one of the things we talked about was that as soon as I can verify that this has been signed, I will reach out to the vendor. I will next time tell you who the vendor is, because they haven't signed it yet, so I can't. Or at least I don't know if they've signed it. But as soon as I get verification, I will reach out to the vendor and talk about what are the next steps to kick this off. There's desire at the risk assessment group meeting for there to be a working group from all 3 delivery systems who would interface with the vendor. I know that we talked about that. I know we put that in the RFP initially. So it's just we have to get it started. So as soon as I get that verification, that will be the next process. And we'll get this thing ready to go. And as I told the risk assessment group as well, my research team knows this is coming. They keep asking me about it because they know that they have a data request to fill as soon as signed. So they know, and they're waiting for the call. It's not like they're going to be like, want us to do what? No, they know, and they're waiting for us to trigger the data request and get that data over to the vendor and get that going. They know that this is coming. So we're excited. Question 3rd.
We'll move to 7 on the workload studies, Jake.
Well, yes. So Monday we met with the vendor. Similar to what Kelly just said, we refer to them as a vendor because we have not have a fully executed contract at this point. But we did have a very good meeting with them on Monday. Some highlights to that meeting, obviously dialing in the work plan that was laid out within the RFP, had some conversations around that. We are talking about a very aggressive timeline, one, to get us started, two, a timeline to have potentially a product, and we shot for a goal of October of 2026, that's generally around the time that the commissioner would have to provide an updated budget to the governor. So we want to kind of align it with the same timelines as we have with some of the budgeting processes with the commissioner. So we'll be working with a vendor to try to meet that deadline. Generally speaking, the timeline is around, when we set the RFP, around 24 months. Some of the things that we want to make sure to discuss are just some of the finer details that what would likely come through the development of a leadership team. So ideally, one, let's get us to a contract, dial in the deliverables. Part of that is kind of dialing in the cost of for each of those specific deliverables. That's kind of the stuff we have to deal with the contract. But more importantly is what do we need to do next to get us ready and moving forward, so we can hit the ground running when the ink is dry in the contract and we can start working with the vendor and we can name the vendor, so to speak. So one of the things that I want to make sure, specifically with the workload study, is talking with this group here about getting ourselves a leadership team ready to go in April. Working and talking with the vendor, what is the scope? What should we be? What are some parameters that they would like to see? What are the parameters we would like to see in relation to who that leadership team? So the leadership team is going to have to they're going to have to make decisions. They're going to have to say, we include this, we don't include this. So they'll have that autonomy to really set the direction with the workload study. There will be another team specifically for the study itself, and that will be that kind of development team in relation to itemizing a task, a supervision task, or administrative task, etc. That kind of gets into the weeds as far as what that team will kind of work together on. But the ask here today is, can we come up with representatives that we want to put forward on that leadership team? The scope of the team should be no more than 10, just from a span of control and productivity perspective. They should be representative of our delivery systems, including geography. Like I said, they should be decision makers. And one suggestion that I'll just put to this body here is that maybe we have one director from each of our delivery systems that serves on CSAC to be a part of that, and maybe another director outside of that from each delivery system or representative to serve on that. Also, what we would like to do, and this is I say our RFP committee, in consultation with the vendors, individuals who have a very firm understanding of data systems, our CSTS data system, a firm understanding of research and or workload studies or studies in that realm. And so that's the ask here today, is to develop representatives and making that nomination or getting that approval. So then in April, if we're fortunate enough to have the contract ready to go in April, we can set that first meeting with the leadership team and the vendor and start the work immediately. So one idea would be, could we just provide those names to our CSAC chairs, Kelly, Molly, and John, and those be adopted, and that becomes the subcommittee, the workload subcommittee. Would we invite, we have our RFP group and those within the work group, as potential folks as well. So I want to put that on the table for all of you in discussion, that do you think we can realistically get names and establish our 10 folks for a leadership team by mid-April?
Yes, you can on our side. I was just thinking, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, we meet Friday, MACPO meets Friday, if I'm not mistaken. So So, whether we make a vote on Friday or in the next couple of weeks via email, we can get that done.
Yes. Two, correct. And one hopefully from here.
The ones, either you or Becky. So
Yeah.
we really have one.
And then does that sound doable for MACPO too?
Yeah, taking from Mac. Well, we're meeting Friday, so I can bring that to the group. And I don't think we'd have any issue with having members or somebody that would be on that.
So ideally, I mean, if you're looking at this from a membership standpoint, if you're looking at 2 director or representatives from each delivery system, that would leave 4 additional spots where I would really invite that to those that have the research understanding, the data systems understanding, our CSTS. Why is that important? Because like we have this data, but we can't necessarily extract that data effectively to give, etc. So it's nice to have some individuals that really know our CSTS database and our other databases we have that can help guide direction in relation to what should and should not be included from data point perspective. And Julie, yeah, I mean, like those that were on the RFP committee, I would say that would be also invitation to those that were on the RFP review committee. And I can't thank them all enough for the fabulous conversations we've had, the great feedback we've had. And I think just again at the end of the conversation on Monday, I mean, I think everybody was just really energized and excited to just really get this going. So I think we're going to have a fantastic study at the end of the day.
I wonder, to your question on the CSTS leadership, we all have 2 reps on the CSTS executive committee. Whether it's like having a discussion with them, I guess, on I think would be best, or if it's one of them, or I don't know. But
yeah, I'm right. That's why I maybe would just defer maybe to our chairs as far as the final vetting of that subcommittee membership.
Sure. What do others think? I mean, it's not really, it's all of our decisions. So happy to talk about it, but.
I'm actually wondering if there's enough space for other people who might want to be involved. So who's on the RFP review committee right now? Think that the work.
It would be myself, Matt Cook, Tammy Jolieberg, Danette Buskovic, Julia Tella, and John Shiro. So there's 6 of us currently on that.
And then, sorry, what's quorum again for this group, so we don't get that CSAC numbers?
You said 10, right?
Yes.
10.
Okay.
So can I ask Jake, you're saying there's a difference. There's also like another group that's going to be developing the workload study. So is that, so like I think in DOC terms, like the person we turn to understand CSTS is going to be, but she might be like appropriate for that other group, right? Like she's in the weeds, she understands how to do all the data entry.
Right. Yeah, because you're gonna have a group that's gonna develop probably the worksheets that are going to be used to record the data. And essentially, where we call it an apple, they call it a manzana. So yep, that's the same item. And so we got to categorize like the task and the supervision. And so I think there's going to be kind of those that'll have to align the nomenclature that we use around specific tasks and work we do with clients, and align them up into the kind of the reporting forms and pilot study or the pilot process with that, and then and the rollout. So creating probably power users amongst that team for the actual study itself.
So that'll be, so I'm just trying to differentiate like what kind of folks we need on this group versus
Maybe if that's the conversation we can have offline to help the role clarification between the two groups and the types of skill sets we want for the two groups, then bringing that back here to have the discussion. I don't know, that could be a way to do it, because the other skill set, not just the data, what goes in and out, is the evaluation skill set, which I would assume is in that second group. You know, I mean, that's different than just like how does CSTS work or how to.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a better term for that subsequent group is the design team, if that makes more sense.
So then what kind of decisions would leadership team need to make? Do you have an example? I know that you.
Well, like let's just a quick example off the cuff. So if we're talking about it like administrative costs, overhead costs, do we include the county treasurer that brings in, that manages all the budget stuff, or not? Do we include this is and I'm kind of referring back to the conversation, Matt, maybe you can help me out too, the conversation we had when we first talked about this workload study. There's a lot of back and forth in relation to what's in, what's out, what's not, and coming to that consensus. And this, you know, essentially this leadership group needs to understand, like, you're not just representing your agency, but you have to think of it globally as well as that. Yep, that's how we do it, but that's not how everybody else does it. So we don't necessarily, that isn't necessarily in scope from an administrative cost perspective. That yep, we do run an outpatient CD program out of our probation, but is that really part of the core services that's aligned with the workload costs or the capitated rate? So those are the kinds of decisions I think from the leadership team we'd have to kind of align with understanding is what's the scope specifically as far as those types of questions, those types of areas that we'd have to have a conversation around. It would even go as far as pretrial. You know, is pretrial going to be a scope, but statutorily it's not. You know, it's not required. So I know we've had those conversations as well, and that's not every agency operates pretrial. So those are kind of an example that we would probably, as a leadership team, need to make decisions on. So then, as it then develops into the actual workload design, that creates the process in which the data is being collected.
Yeah, and I would just add, give an invitation. It's also the back end, right? So the vendor will be recommending components of the formula, perhaps, or just takeaways from the workload study, and you know, interpreting that, and because this needs to make it into statute in one form or another. You know, what is the picture going to be when we get this work back? Is that in 2026? Is that in 2027? Are we still facing a $6 billion deficit at that time? Do we have an administration change? There's just a lot of dynamics to manage. So, you know, for what it's worth, my recommendation is that leadership team is equipped with people who all know how to navigate that series of dynamics. And like you said, Jade, the design team is the folks who can ensure that we're doing really high quality, verifiable, you know, stands up to scrutiny type of work.
And I know it's semantics, and I know that's not what you mean. It's also like when it's about decisions, it's like, it's still recommendations back here, back to the commissioner who has ultimate, like, right? Not true decisions.
What, the workload study?
Right.
Yeah, in the end, this group has to work with the commissioner on final.
Just, I mean, because I think that word came up a lot yesterday, two decisions, and then I think people are like, wait a minute, like, it's still recommendations back up to CSPAC, back up to, right? And so people kind of get lost. It's an important semantic thing in my mind.
Yeah, and in each phase laid out, there will be a report that will be coming to this body here for review, feedback, and back through the leadership team and then the vendor. So I just want to make sure is that it's not going to be necessarily a rogue process, but also there'll be review and scrutiny by this group here as well in relation to each of the reports that will come in each phase.
Which will be an important distinction for that leadership team also to be like flagging things. When do we need to bring stuff back up to CSAC or not, to like kind of understand, like you said, the big picture work. It's really ultimately how our future funding formula is established. I mean, that is heavy and like it needs as many eyes and people weighing into it as possible in the end. So
Yeah, the leadership team needs to have an eye on buy-in.
yeah,
It's not really the design team's job.
right. Yeah. Other,
So I think Jake is asking for the ability to get this group set up for the next meet in CSAC. So, and the chairs make the final calls, and would the rest of the committee be comfortable with that? I guess would be the question on the table. Totally okay if anyone wants to push back on that.
for MACAC, we can bring that back as well this week. Come back, like you said, the co-chairs, it's still a conversation we can have in April again with this. This is our proposal then, is here's what we talked about, here's, you know, and then what does everybody think that this 10 folks and these other folks may. Especially, right now we're focusing on the leadership team.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah.
Is there any opposition to that or questions about that? Okay. And we'll bring that back in April. Thank you, Jake.
Okay, thank you.
The last we have is committee other business and committee vacancies. So Jake, I have you as well.
Oh, I went off mute prematurely. Well, hey, welcome, Amber. How'd it go?
It went great.
Well, welcome, Amber. Is one of the vacant positions, individuals with lived experience. We welcome you to this body and look forward to your valued input. And the door is always open. And I'm sure everybody at this room would say that reach out to any of us to help get caught up or understanding of some of the things going on. Because I'm sure we probably we threw out about 150 acronyms in this conversation today to help navigate all those things we speak in acronym within corrections. But so with that being said, welcome, Amber. And then we did have another individual. Unfortunately, that individual just it took another evaluation of his life and just said, I just don't think it's right. So I reached out to Kevin, and so I have an email invitation out to another individual to have a conversation, same conversation about here's the expectations, etc. And so if that, I'll schedule hopefully a Teams or a Zoom meeting with that person, and then if they're interested, I will report back to Kevin, our selection committee of two, and then we'll confirm and then make that recommendation to the commissioner for that other vacant position.
Thank you.
I have another item as well for other business. As I mentioned, we did tell the legislature all of CSAC's recommendations, and there actually is a bill to change the membership of CSAC to add a judge, two judges, one rural, one metro, a prosecutor, and defense attorney, and then to tweak the lived experience one so that before it was very have to be one from each delivery system, and now we just want to make sure we have all three represented, so we made that language a little bit broader so that we could get more applicants. And that was heard in the Senate.
Could be. It's an Emilio thing.
I know. It was heard in the House. That's where I was yesterday. Duh. It was heard in the House yesterday, and that has moved on to the next level. It's actually heard in both. Sorry, it was heard in the Senate last Friday. It was heard in the House yesterday. Both. In the House, it moved forward to the floor for a vote. In the Senate, it has to go through one more committee. So, fingers crossed that change will actually make it through. That's the only CSAC recommendation I'm aware of that did make it into legislation this year. I just wanted to let you know that some of it did. So there you go.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Any other business?
Just two quick things up, and I think I mentioned this to Jake. We are doing a leadership cohort at MNGRC people with lived experience, because so many of these positions are opening up, not only here, but in other places where they're asking for people with lived experience. But it's a learning curve, right? So we're doing a leadership cohort at MNJRC. So if things come up like this, eventually we are going to have people that feel more ready, I think, and feel more supported to do these things. The other thing, and I think I've talked to Matt about this, and I talked to Jake and some other folks, but the drug testing problem continues to bubble up. And we feel these, I don't know if to call them complaints even, but queries from Wilkin County, Clearwater County, Crow Wing County that, the drug testing is just, it's not working for folks. And sometimes I think we sound like we're talking out both sides of our mouth, and that we're really interested in preventing, of course, overdose. But maybe drug testing isn't the route to do that in the way it's being done. And we hear from agents too that building rapport is difficult when your analysis, especially, I think, right? I was just talking to the state director in Georgia, and he has been trying to really push towards some other thing than your analysis, because his agents keep coming to him and say, I'm trying to build rapport with my client, and then I say, please be into this cut, right? So, gentlemen from Ottertail County or wherever, we continue to look for places that are willing to pilot any sort of innovative stuff on drug testing to try to improve it. If it's, hey, we're going to do more drug testing, we'd be interested in evaluating that. Hey, if it's going to be, we're going to do less drug testing, we'd be interested in evaluating that. I mentioned to Carter earlier, we're working on a bill actually on probable cause for community supervision. This is the route Illinois has gone, where not everybody gets drug tested, but there has to be probable cause. We have guys that have spent 20 years in prison, had no history of drug or alcohol use, and still have to leave their jobs at noon and drive a long ways to drug test. Well, their foreman isn't really happy when it happens, right? So I don't have solutions. I just feel like this is something we can do better. And we're hearing it from agents. We're hearing it from impacted people. So interesting.
Do you know if in the areas where you're hearing, like, first of all, are you hearing about it on probation or supervisory?
Both, yeah.
I was just wondering if it is ordered by the court, or if it is a practice of the corrections agency.
Yeah. And I think this is something we don't really have the resources to dig into as much, right? And so we feel these complaints. Frankly, the one in Crow Wing County actually did not support him in this case, right? Because I think actually his crimes were related to his addiction. And he said, I got sent back to prison because I failed the drug test. Well, you had a string of burglaries that are related to your addiction. I think the drug testing was probably good in this case, right? But like the Wilkin County one was really expensive. And they were charging the person for drug testing. This is what the person said anyways, right? And apparently there's grants available from the state that you could make this free for people to do drug testing. And then some counties are not taking advantage of this grant that's available. And so I think they all vary, Kelly. This is why it's so hard, right? And then sometimes, like I said, we dig into them like, well, your story isn't exactly holding up, right? So
Please don't take it away. Don't.
Yeah, I don't think taking it away completely is a good idea, but so for instance, the example of, I'm sorry, but this person that's never had a history of drug and alcohol, who is endangering his job by leaving work at noon to drive to New Hope from Clearwater County.
I deal with that.
Yeah.
I mean, well, now, like, Partners Behavioral Health, you could do like a mouth swab on Zoom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that'd be something. I think we need to test for synthetic drugs and for the stuff that they put in their urine to make it clean. I mean, they're so tricky. I don't know. There's a lot around the drug test. I love that conversation.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on with marijuana right now. Tammy has mentioned that too, that she's not exactly sure what the status of marijuana.
Varying practices, honestly. Kennefen doesn't screen for it unless it's a problem that individual in some other counties might just have a part of the panel. Varying practices.
Thank you. All right, well, if there's nothing else, then we can adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you again. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we're definitely on site.